Rain came down like long threads pulled from the sky, cold and silvery, braiding the pines into one shivering wall. Mireya Thorn moved through it with her hood low and her hands bare, fingers numb and stained with herbs. She should have gone around the marsh track. Only fools and wolves took the low road when the river swelled. But night was coming, and with it, the coven's runners and the vampires, tithe-men and a girl who was both witch and wolf, belonged to no one long enough to be safe. She smelled the blood before she saw it. Iron-heavy and raw, it cut through wet bark and soggy earth, a thin red thread tangling the rain. She crouched in the reeds where the track bent toward a fallen ash. The wolf lay half in water, half on mud, flank torn open by something with barbed wire teeth. A trap, she thought. Not hunter clean but cruel, a sawtooth vise designed to gnaw even as it held. The wolf's eyes were clouded with pain, ears flattened, breath harsh. When he bared his teeth, Mireya bared her own back, not in threat, but in answer. I see you. I am not prey. The wolf hated the trap, not her. Easy, she said, voice low, letting sound thread into the rain like smoke into fog. If you bite me, you'll drown before guilt can find you. She slid her hands under the teeth of the rusted iron. Magic sat in her like a tired bird, wings slick and heavy, but it stirred when she set her palm to cold metal. Words the coven had taught her stuck in her throat like ash. She swallowed them and reached for older speech, the one that lived in bone and breath. The letters rose without ink or candle, a pattern of breath, a rhythm of blood, a softening of the small places where things lock and snare. Let go, she whispered, to the trap or to the forest she wasn't sure, and the vise quivered, and opened with a groan. The wolf collapsed, flesh slid, blood spilled. Mireya pressed cloth to the wound and looked upward only once, half expecting the rain to wash her name away. No one said it aloud anymore, not in the packs, not in the circles. The last time she heard it in a friendly mouth was when her mother had whispered it as they ran. Run, Mireya. If they can't name you, they can't bind you. She took out her needle. The thread was boar sinew, thicker than a surgeon would choose. But she didn't have a surgeon, she didn't have a clinic, she didn't have a covenant. She had her hands, and what her blood could coax from broken things. She sewed with the calm of starving people who divide bread without crying. The wolf's breath stuttered. The rain thickened until it was almost cloth. When her vision blurred, she dragged the back of her wrist across her eyes and laughed soundlessly at the thought that she could cry any more tears than the sky. You're not going to die here, she said, not sure which of them she meant. She tucked a sprig of eneleaf against the sealed flesh, smeared honey to ward off rot, and set her palm over the stitching. Heat lifted from the wolf, a burn without flame, the kind that pulled the ache out of bone and sent it into the water. She let the witch part of her sing low until the wolf part answered, a rough, humming harmony that smelled of pine and smoke and moon. She had learned long ago that if she let one half rule, the other became a blade. Balance wasn't peace. Balance was holding two knives by the flat of their blades and walking. The wolf slept. Mireya sat back on her heels and stared at the rippling track. She should leave. If hunters set that trap, they would be close. If vampires set it, they would be closer. She wiped her needle on the hem of her tunic, and tucked it into the leather roll with her files. She had to be in Thornmarket by moonrise. Lord Varen's tithe-men liked their debtors punctual, especially the pretty ones, especially the strange ones, especially the ones who smelled of power and desperation. She had sold her blood twice this month already. Once, because hunger was a kind of death that came smiling. Twice, because freedom was a ledger, and every debt needed ink. Vampires paid in coin that bought bread and time, and if they took a little more than they paid, at least they didn't preach deliverance while counting your steps. She stood. The rain changed. At first it was only that it smelled different, colder, cleaner, like the first breath taken after being held under too long. Then the wind shifted and something in her spine lifted its head. Scent moved like hands past her face. Smoke. Juniper. A thread of iron like polished steel. And something else she didn't have a name for, because the word for it lived in a language that predated her coven and her pack. A language that used names like doors. She turned very slowly. He stood on the track where the pines claimed back the road. Tall, dark, clothes wet and unbothered by it, he carried his own weather like a cloak. No lantern, no guard, no need. The rain did not touch his eyes. They were gold like grain at dusk. And when they found the wolf behind her, they softened, and when they found her again, they did not. "Alpha," her wolf said, in the low rowing boat voice that only spoke to warn and to want. "King," said the witch part, counting the runes cut deep where others couldn't see them. The tilt of his mouth held like a blade at rest, the way the forest breathed around him as if it knew his name. "Step away from my scout," he said. His voice was stone-warmed by sunlight that rarely reached it. Not angry, not yet. Possessive, but not the way vampires were. "Not you are mine because I paid. More like you are mine because I am the one who stands between you and the dark. And I will not fail you even if it kills me." "He would have bled out," Mireya said. "Your trap was cruel." She kicked the twisted iron. A piece snapped off and skittered into the ditch. The Alpha's eyes flicked to the metal and back. "Not ours," he said. "And not yours. The scent of it is wrong. Filth and rust and rot. Whoever set it wants to hurt what they catch before they eat." His gaze dropped to the neat, thick stitching along the wolf's flank. It lingered there in a silence that felt like a question laid gently on her hands. "You sealed him with witchcraft." He breathed in then, a small thing, a simple human act, and the world tilted. The wind curled around her and carried her to him whether she moved or not. His shoulders went tight, his mouth parted. Shock cut his face into something younger, more dangerous. "And you smell like rain on pine bark and the moment before lightning touches the field," he said, voice roughened. "You smell like the thing I have been starving for without knowing its name." Lightning found the field. Not in the sky. In her. The old stories used 100 names for it. Bond, mate, thread, calling. The coven called it a beast's trick to seduce the simple. The Pax called it the only holy law. Mireya called it cruel. A door she did not ask to walk through opening in the middle of her running. "No," she said, before either of them could decide what they meant to the other. "Whatever you think you smell, you don't want it." Her voice went flat the way it did when the tithemen laid down papers and asked how much she could spare without fainting. "I'm on my way to pay a debt. I don't belong to you, Alpha. Kalen Draven," he said, as if names were a kind of bread you offered strangers before you asked for anything else. "Alpha, King of the Nightward, I don't want you because you belong to me. I want you because you don't belong to anyone who would break you. And I think." His jaw flexed, as if he didn't trust his mouth not to make a promise it couldn't keep. "I think the forest brought me here before I broke myself on the wrong door." Mireya's laugh was soft and terrible. "The forest doesn't bring Nightward kings to women like me. It brings torches and ropes and choices that aren't choices." She nudged the wolf with her toe. "He'll need broth tomorrow. Keep him warm. Don't let him tear the stitching when he wakes." She shouldered her bag. "You're leaving." It wasn't a question. He smelled the direction she was about to take and stepped into it, not blocking her, standing in it as if he could rewrite its ending by being there. "Debt to who?" "Varin," she said, because sometimes saying a vampire's name aloud was enough to make them appear and save you the walk. "He likes my blood. Says it has a bite. He pays on time and doesn't ask where I sleep. I owe him 3 measures and then I owe no one." She did not say, "if I live." Kalen's face changed in a way that was almost invisible, a shadow passing under the skin when cloud crosses moon. Disgust, she thought, too familiar with it to flinch. But the disgust wasn't for her. "Varin sets traps like that," he said, glancing at the twisted iron. "He feeds on pain like others feed on wine." He stepped closer, not close enough to crowd, close enough that the world filled with the sound of rain on leather and the clean, warm scent of him. Close enough that the thing that had stood inside her spine all its life put its hands on the rails and leaned in. "Come to Nightward. I will honor whatever ledger you carry and burn it if you ask me to." "Kings don't burn debts," she said. "They collect them." She saw it then, the flicker in his eyes, not hurt, but something like the recognition of hurt. The way a warrior lets a cut bleed a moment to learn how deep it is before he binds it. He wasn't stung by her scorn, he was measuring her wound. "I have collected too much," he said. "My father taught me that a king is a wall. I didn't know a wall can become a prison for those inside it." His hand lifted, then dropped, as if he would have touched the air near her shoulder if touch were language they shared. "I could track you blindfolded," he said quietly. "Do you know that? Across a river, through a market, if you ran across ash. I would know your scent even if I lost my name." He wasn't bragging, he was afraid of how true it was. "Then don't." Mireya slipped past him like a thread through a needle's eye, careful not to brush cloth to cloth. Touch would be a door. Doors opened, doors closed. She couldn't be caught between another one. "Let the wolf sleep," she said. "And tell whatever forest brought you that it's late." She walked without looking back. She heard him exhale once, a sound that could have been a word if he believed words could save either of them. Then the rain took the space between them and wove it into night. Thornmarket's torches bloomed through fog like a row of cruel flowers. The gates were studded with nails. The men there wore Varin's colors, black as a shut mouth, red as a just bitten lip. Mireya felt them smell her even before they stepped out from under the arch. "Briar Girl," said the taller one, the name they gave her because she never gave her own. "You're late." "I was sewing," she said. "It's difficult to hurry when you're borrowing a life against weather." She held out her wrist. The token was a sliver of bone carved with vines. It flashed with a wet light when it touched the torch glow. "3 measures and we are done." "3 tonight," said a voice from shadows behind the gate, "and 3 tomorrow, if I like the taste." Lord Varin stepped into the light with the quiet of a knife being pulled from velvet. He was beautiful the way statues are beautiful, exact, cold and slightly incorrect if you look too long. He breathed in, his mouth curled. "You smell of something new, Briar Girl." His tongue touched his teeth like a cat testing cream. "Rain on pine and a coin the moment before it's tossed." His smile was a door you only saw after it closed behind you. "Bring her in." Mireya let them take her because she had been taken before and still walked out. Because she had a ledger, and she would end it. Because debt was a kind of spell, and she knew how to break spells if the price was only blood. As they led her past the gate toward the long hall scabbed with iron, she lifted her face to the rain one last time, and let it wash away the scent of the wolf she had healed, and the king who had spoken her without saying her name. For a moment the air changed again, clean, cold, cutting. She didn't turn. She was not a fool. She only thought, in a voice that was not a prayer, "Don't come here. This is where people are measured and weighed. This is where hunger is a hobby." Behind her, some distance out where pines hid the road from the torches, a wolf lifted its head and breathed. Gold eyes closed. A jaw tightened. Rain took a shape and walked after her, as if it had decided that tonight, for once, it would choose its own ending. The halls of Thornmarket were built to make humans feel small, and vampires feel home. Stones sweated, and flames leaned toward doors that didn't open. Mireya sat on the edge of a low bed, and counted her breaths, as the attendant tied a leather tourniquet around her arm. The girl didn't look at her face, only at her veins. There was kindness in that. A kindness learned in places where eyes were weapons. "Do you want bread after?" the attendant asked. "Some do. Some don't keep it." "Bread," Mireya said. She always asked for it. Something in her needed crumb and salt, and the weight of an ordinary loaf in her hand, to remind her that a day could end with warmth that wasn't borrowed. "And tea, if you can spare the leaves." The attendant nodded, bound the brass cup in place, and slid the needle with the ease of someone who didn't waste motion. When blood began to move, the room grew larger and far away. Mireya watched herself watch her own hand pale. She thought of the wolf under pin-threaded sky. She thought of the man with a name carved into the rain. She thought of her mother's hands dusted with flour, pressing a crack in a loaf closed with a thumb. Of the coven circle, where those same hands had been bound. Of the night the pack had howled for a thing they said broke law by existing. She had left through a window, and never stopped leaving. Her mother had promised to follow. Promises were a kind of magic. Some broke under weather. The door opened. Not the attendant's door. The door in front of her, the one with the iron rose. Varin came in without footsteps, like always. He looked at the flowing measure in the tube, and then at Mireya's face, as if weighing whether the second was worth as much as the first. "You smell of wolf," he said, and sat in the chair by the bed as if it had been built for him, which it had, and something older. "I smell of rain," Mireya said. "Everyone does tonight. Not like this." Varin's smile was gentle because gentle was the cruelest kind when it wasn't real. "The King of Nightward has been hunting my roads. Wolves who forget whose iron they walk over need reminding." He leaned back. "Perhaps he smelled you and thought you were a story and followed. Perhaps he is in my hall now, looking for the story." He tilted his head. "Shall I tell him one?" "Tell him I'm no one," Mireya said, and closed her eyes because she was dizzier with the room than with the lack of blood. The attendant loosened the strap, replaced the measure, counted aloud to keep herself from listening. 1, 2, 3. "Tell him to go home." "Kings rarely do as they are told," Varin said. "But they do as they must." He leaned forward, elbow on his knee, his voice dropping into a space where it could be mistaken for intimacy. "I tell you something now for free. He won't stop. Not until he knows why the rain smelled like a word he didn't know he needed." His fingers sketched a little circle in the air as if drawing a rune. "He will offer you safety. Perhaps love. I have seen wolves die of those things. They turned out to be the same thing spoken in a different accent." "Love is not a wolf word," Mireya said, "because it was the kind of thought you only said aloud when your blood was leaving, and you didn't mind how it sounded. It's a fire word." "Exactly," Varin said, and his smile showed the edge behind it. "Fire burns both ways," he stood. 3 measures tonight, 3 tomorrow. I will hold your token until then." He lifted the sliver of bone from her wrist with 2 fingers, as if it offended him by touching her. "After that, you are free." He let the token swing. "If you still want to be." The needle slipped. Pain flashed clean and white and gone. The attendant's hand shook. Mireya put her free hand over the girl's wrist, and held it, until the shaking stopped. "Bread," she reminded her, because promises, even small ones, taught the room that some things could still be true. The bread was warm. The tea was bitter. She ate sitting on the bed with her legs drawn up, the way she had eaten since she was little, the way you eat when walls might move. When she finished, she licked crumb from her thumb, and this time when the door with the iron rose opened, she didn't look up, because she already knew. The scent went through her like a bell struck once in a quiet city. Even without turning, she could tell he wasn't alone. Wolves do not walk alone into vampire halls even when they are kings. "Mireya Thorn," Kaelan Draven said, and she wanted to laugh because he had found her name and used it like a gift instead of a hook. "I believe you have a debt I can clear." She looked at him now. He had water in his hair, and an expression like he was standing between a wave and a house. Behind him stood 2 others with Nightward's marks at their throats, and behind them stood men whose mouths smelled like old wine, and whose eyes didn't blink when people bled. Varin sat in his chair, hands folded like a book closed neatly. "Your Majesty," he said pleasantly, the word a small knife laid casually on bread. "Welcome to my table." "No table," Kaelan said, not breaking eye contact with Mireya. "Only a ledger." "Everything is a table," Varin said. "We lay people on them and see what the tools can do." He tapped the token against his knee. "The Briar girl owes me. She owes me because I helped her not starve. I owe her because her blood tastes like stories. We are even when I say we are." His eyes glinted. "Or when someone pays to make it so." "I will pay," Kaelan said. And the way he said it made the word sound like the first thing he had ever learned to do. "Name your price." "A day," Varin said, "and a night. Under my roof." She came for that. Not coin. He let the bone token dangle. "She will give what she promised. And then you may burn the ledger, if it makes you feel holy." Mireya stood. Her legs held. The room tilted and stood still again. She put her breadplate down. She saw the trap spring before it did. Wolves didn't know how to lose people in halls like this. They knew how to break doors and take bodies. Vampires knew how to lose people with a gesture. "I will give what I promised," she said, speaking before Cullen could. "But you will not take more," she looked at Varin. "If I pay in 3 measures tonight and 3 tomorrow, and I walk out breathing, you are done with me. Say it where the walls can hear." Varin's mouth curled. "Done," he said, and the stones listened because they liked old words that sounded like oaths. Kaelin's jaw worked. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Mireya said. "I don't belong to you." The words hurt because they were the rope she wrapped around her own throat. She loosened them. "And you don't belong to me." She looked at him until his shoulders lowered half an inch as if she had put a hand on them. "If you want to help me, don't try to mend me with metal. Stand outside the door until I walk through it." She smiled then, small and dry. "If I don't walk through, burn the house down." One of Kaelin's wolves choked on a laugh that was mostly a cough. Kaelin's eyes flicked with something that might have been pride. "I will stand," he said. "I will not leave." He turned his head slowly to Varin. "You heard her. If she does not walk out at dusk tomorrow, I will pull your roof down around your ears and bury your cellars in the river, and I will salt the ground where your name was written." He wasn't threatening, he was reading weather. "Romantic," Varin said. "I always forget how much wolves love poetry when they're angry." He stood. "Take her to the red room." The red room was not red. It was white, the way bone is white when it is cleaned too much. Mireya lay on the bed and watched the ceiling breathe. The attendant kept her hand warm. The measures filled. When they took the last one, the world went away a little, then came back with a curl of cold around the edges. "Eat," the attendant said, and Mireya did, because she wanted to see the morning. She slept sitting up because lying down made her feel like the river had claimed her. When she woke, there was a boys' choir of bones singing in her arms and legs, but the room stayed still. She ate again. She counted. She waited. At dusk, the door with the iron rose opened, and a man with an unhappy mouth said, "Time." Mireya stood. The attendant tied her cloak. "Bread for the road," the girl said, and slipped a loaf into her bag. Mireya touched the girl's hair, and left. Varin waited in the hall with his smile on. Kaelin stood beside the door, wet again, as if rain went to him the way words went to priests. He didn't reach for her. He only smiled a little, like a man being given back something he'd dropped in the snow and thought lost forever. "Walk," he said, and fell in beside her as she went for the gate. Wolves parted. Vampires watched. Varin let the bone token swing and then tossed it. Mireya caught it with fingers that felt more steady than they should have. "Done," Varin said, pleasant as summer wine. "Until you need me again." "I won't," Mireya said, and stepped into rain. Kaelin walked with her until the torches were behind them, and trees began again. They didn't speak. The sound of their feet in puddles was reader quiet. When the gate was only a memory of light behind wet leaves, Kaelin stopped. "You don't owe me," he said. "But I'm asking anyway. Come to Nightward." He looked past her into the forest, as if night could overhear and tell dawn. "There is a law against you. A bad one. It says hybrids are a breaking of balance, and must be given to the circle or the court." He meant coven or vampires. "I have changed laws, I can change this. But it will take time, and I need you alive while I do it." "The coven will not let you," Mireya said. "And if they do, the Pax won't. You'll burn your house down and be left with a field of ash." She tried to smile. It hurt. "I know how to live in ash." "Then teach me." He stepped closer, and the air tensed, like a bow drawn back. "Give me 3 nights. Come under my roof as my guest, not my queen. Eat bread. Sleep. Don't run while your blood is building back. After that, if you want to leave, I will track you only to make sure you're not bleeding out in a ditch." He tried to make it a joke. It wasn't. Please. She should say number no was the word that had kept her alive. But some words take you to a door, and then put the handle in your hand, and there is no use pretending you don't know what doors do. 3 nights, she said. And you don't touch me without asking. She watched his mouth. Even if the forest tells you to. I don't listen to forests, he said, which was a lie told kindly. I listen to women who save wolves in the rain. He turned, as if moving too fast would frighten something, and started down a path that wasn't there until he walked it. Nightward sat where hills rolled toward the river like wolves shouldered against one another to keep warm. The halls were built of dark wood that smelled like thunder. Inside, the rooms were firelit and littered with things that had been mended instead of thrown away. Mireya's chest hurt suddenly, not the pain of needles but the ache of recognition. People who kept what was broken believed it would still be useful. Or beautiful. Or both. They gave her a room with a bed that had been slept in by someone who laughed a lot, and a window that opened to rain. On the table, there was bread and honey and a pot of stew. She ate with a wolf's appetite and a witch's caution, then sat on the floor with her back against the bed, and her knees drawn up because that was how she rested when she wanted to sleep but didn't trust sleep to be kind. She didn't hear Kalen come until his scent cut through fire smoke. She looked up. He was in the doorway with his hands loose at his sides like a soldier coming to a sick room trying not to scare the patient. I brought this, he said, and held up a small leather-wrapped book and a bottle. Ink and tonic. I thought you might want to write something down that isn't a debt, and the tonic tastes like regret, but it helps. He put both on the table and backed away, as if he'd entered a temple without knowing the rules. Sleep. No one will come through your door unasked. If you dream and don't like it, knock. I don't sleep much. He hesitated. Not because I'm afraid, he added, and then smiled at himself, because I'm afraid of waking. 3 nights, she reminded him. I know how to count to 3, he said. After that, you'll tell me whether I'm allowed to count higher. He closed the door on the soft sound of rain. Mireya slept. When she dreamed, it was of a field where wolves ran under a sky that smelled like the moment before a storm breaks, and her mother stood at the edge of it with flour on her hands and said, "This is yours if you let it be." She woke with wet face and a soft throat and the taste of honey in her mouth. Outside, morning came with a sound like someone whispering under the eaves. She went to the window. The yard below was full of wolves, not wolves. Men and women in work shirts, and bare feet carrying bread and axes, laughing low. A boy threw a ball for a pup, who missed it by an exaggerated mile, and fell on his back, trying to look like he meant to. Mireya smiled before she could stop herself. A knock. Mireya, Kalen's voice. Breakfast, and then a walk. I promised the forest I would ask you for a walk. She opened the door. He was barefoot with his hair wet, shirt sleeves rolled, holding 2 bowls and a loaf. He was beautiful in a way that hurt less when he wasn't wearing a crown. He tilted his head. You look less like someone stole your night. Someone borrowed it, she said. I'll have it back by dusk. They walked through the wet pines after bread. The world smelled like green stone and clean water, and the thing that lived under language. There's a law, Kalen said finally. I told you. It was written after a war, won, don't remember because I wasn't born, but I carry it because I carry Nightward. It says, we give hybrids to the circle, or the court. It says we don't let them choose. He stopped. I'm going to break it. He looked at her. If I do, there will be a price, not just in words. Will you let me pay it? She wanted to say no because wolves who say yes get their throats opened at dances. She wanted to say yes because there it was again, the door, the handle, warm in her hand as if someone had opened it from the other side and stepped back. If you pay it for me, she said slowly, it will be yours. The pack will blame me. The coven will blame me. The court will blame me. They will say I used witchcraft to bend a king. She lifted her chin. So don't pay it for me. Pay it for the next girl who smells like rain and a burned law. His eyes went bright as if fire had walked behind them. I will. He stepped closer. And if you are not mine after I do it, I am not a prize, she said, not soft. You are not. He smiled, a small, startled thing that wanted to be larger when it grew up. You are a door, and I am asking to walk through. He reached, then stopped, hand in the air between them. May I? She looked at his hand, at the callus where a sword hilt had taught him how to hold it, at the scar that crossed his lifeline, as if someone had tried to rewrite it. She put her palm to his. It was ordinary, and not at all ordinary. Warm, rough, grounding. A thing people did when they weren't being hunted. Yes, she said. But only now. Only now, he echoed, and something in him settled like a bird that had been beating its wings against a window, and finally found the latch. When they came back to the hall, Nightward smelled wrong. Not like bread and smoke, like iron left too long in wet grass. Kaelin's head came up. Mireya's neck prickled. The yard was empty in the way places are when everyone is watching. At the gate, men stood with the circle's sigils sewn to their cloaks, and the court's rings on their fingers. Behind them, lean as knives, were two women with eyes like wells in drought. Coven. Mireya's stomach turned to water, and then to stone. The taller of the two women smiled at her like a teacher, seeing a student who'd skipped class. Sister, she said. I'm not your sister, Mireya said, and Kaelin's fingers brushed her wrist once, not holding, saying here. The courtsman raised a paper. By the Treaty of the Broken Birch, he recited. The creature known as Mireya Thorn, being a hybrid of wolf and witch, is to be delivered to either the circle or the court for adjudication. The King of Nightward will not interfere. He smiled, which was impressive given how much he had to lie to do it. We are here to collect what the law names. Kaelin walked forward alone because he was a wall, and walls don't bring help when they can stand. The treaty is a rotting thing, he said. It starves people who have done nothing but live. It was written by men who are afraid of women, who could do more than one kind of magic. He looked at the paper as if it offended him by existing. I renounce it, here. Now. The yard drew a breath. The coven women looked at each other with ritual slow disapproval. The courtman's smile lost one tooth. You can't, he said, and then, realizing who he was talking to, you wouldn't. I would, Kaelin said. And I did. He turned his head a fraction, enough, so that his voice would find Mireya even if the rain tried to muffle it. Stay behind me. He stepped past the line you keep to stop blood from getting on your boots, and stood within arm's reach of the papers and the rings and the eyes that didn't blink. If you try to take her, I will treat it as an act of war. War, the courtman said, the way rich men say winter from inside houses with two fires. Over a girl who pays debt in blood and sells herself to the night. Over law, Kaelin said. Over the next girl. He smiled, and this time it wasn't gentle, it was honest. And over this one, because she healed my scout in the rain when your trap would have chewed him to bone. There, the taller coven woman said, pleased as if someone had spoken the answer she was waiting for. She practiced witchcraft without circle leave. She broke law. She comes with us. Mireya stepped forward before Kaelin could speak. Because some doors you don't let other people open for you. I practiced healing, she said. If that is a crime, your law is sick, and if you want me, come take me. She lifted her hands. The rain jumped from her palms like sparks. The witch part of her stood up straight, and the wolf part opened its mouth, and the sound that came out wasn't a howl, and wasn't a chant, it was both. Pines bent. Torches sputtered and flares burst from them like seeds when a pod breaks. The courtmen fell back, because they were cowards with nice shoes. The coven women squinted, because they hadn't thought the girl they threw out could shape weather. Kaelin's wolves poured into the yard like a river that knew the route. Kaelin didn't shift. He didn't need to. He took the paper from the courtman and folded it twice, and put it in the man's pocket, patting it like a host returning a napkin. "Run," he said softly. The man ran because he knew the difference between hypotheticals and what someone would actually do to you. The coven women held. Of course they did. They believed themselves to be the only wall that mattered. "Sister," the taller one said again, "you were thrown out because you were unteachable." "I was thrown out because I wouldn't be cut into two halves to fit your knife." Mireya stepped forward until she could see the pores in the woman's skin, and the fine crack in one of her teeth, where she had bitten something she shouldn't. "You see me now." She lifted her hands higher. The rain gathered into a sheet, so thin it was nearly not there, and then she threw it. It wasn't water when it hit. It was silence. It knocked the words out of their mouths, and the breath out of their lungs. They staggered. Kaelin moaned low, a sound that wasn't pain, it was relief, the relief of watching someone you wanted to protect herself. The taller woman raised her palm, and fire blossomed there because coven tricks were always pretty. She threw it. Kaelin moved without thinking, because that is how he moved when the thing he wanted alive was about to be burned. Mireya turned and took the fire in her hands, and when it met the rain she held, it went out with a sound like someone sighing into sleep after crying. She blew the steam back at the woman. "Go home," she said. "Write a new law." She lowered her hands. "Or keep the old one, and see if it saves you when the night comes hungry." The coven women left because they were practical. The court men left because they were cowards with nice shoes. The yard breathed out. Wolves laughed, the way wolves laugh when they have witnessed something that will be a story when they are old. Kaelin turned to Mireya and then stopped because he remembered rules he had set himself, and he was the kind of man who kept them. "You're trembling," he said, which was an observation, not a claim. "I haven't eaten since bread," she said, "and I held fire." He took a step and held out his hand the way he had in the woods, asking. She put hers in it. His skin was warm and rough and not too greedy. 3 nights, she said, because magic loved counting. 2 left, he said. And after that, if you stay because you want to, not because I broke a treaty and shamed you into it. You didn't shame me, she said. You shamed them. She smiled, deep and unsteady. Teach me your law. I'll teach you mine. They ate in the hall with everyone else, because that is what you do when you are trying to turn a house back into a home. Bread was passed. Honey dripped. Someone sang a song about a woman who married the river and didn't drown. Mireya felt her body remember how to eat without counting measures, and how to laugh, without looking over her shoulder, for someone who didn't like the sound. Kaelin sat beside her, but not too close, and sometimes when she reached for a cup, his fingers brushed hers by accident, and the world spoke in a language only their skin understood. That night, she dreamed again. Not of running, of bread, of a table, of ink on paper, not for debts but for stories. She woke before dawn and wrote her name. She wrote it twice to make it true. She wrote, I am not a door, people push through anymore, I am the one who decides when it opens. Morning came breaking quietly on the hills like a bowl set down, gentle on a table. The river carried last night's anger away. Nightward smelled of smoke and soap and the ordinary sweetness of a place where people were alive on purpose. Mireya stood in her doorway with the tonic in her hand, and the little leather book open to a page where she had written nothing yet, because she was afraid if she put down a story it would hold still, and she would have to live inside it. Down the hall a child ran, feet bare, hair wet, laughing the way only children who are fairly certain they are safe can laugh. He skidded to a stop when he saw her, and looked up with a wolf's boldness wearing a human face. Are you the rain lady? He asked. Mireya's mouth went soft. Sometimes, she said. Are you the reason someone was laughing too loud last night? The boy considered this. Maybe. He looked past her at the book. Does it hurt to write? Less than it used to, she said. He nodded sage. My father says the first word is the bleeding one. After that, it's mostly bandages." He grinned and ran on. Mireya stood a moment holding the tonic bottle, weighing whether she wanted something that helped because it tasted like regret. She put it down and chose bread instead. She carried it out to the steps and sat to the yard. Was a study in how to be ordinary. A woman sharpened a knife. A man swept water off the walk. Kalen came from the training ring with his shirt stuck to his skin, and his breath like frost, even though the morning wasn't cold. Mireya tried not to notice his hands and noticed them anyway. He saw her and lifted his palm as if they had invented a new kind of greeting together and he wanted to practice. "Today," he said, sitting 2 steps below her like a man avoiding heights he would climb if told to, "we speak to people who think they own words." He meant the council of elders, who were wolves at table and wolves under it, and the petitioners who carried half a century of habit in their pockets along with their keys. "They will say the law is the law, and we will say law changes or it isn't alive," Mireya said. "And we will say balance is not the cutting of a girl." She broke the bread and gave him half without thinking, and felt her face heat, because in packs, bread was older than rings. He took it with reverence, and ate as if he'd been hungry for that exact loaf, and didn't know it until now. The council sat under antlers and believed it made them wise. Kalen stood on the floor because he was a king who knew that thrones make you forget the height of things. Mireya stood at his left, not behind, and the elders' mouths ticked at that, their teeth wanting to show without permission. Kalen laid out the treaty of broken birch on the table, and put a knife through it so it wouldn't blow away in the breeze from the open windows. "This," he said calmly, "is bad law." "Not because it displeases you," said an elder with a mouth like a trap, "but because you wish to lie with a girl the circle threw out?" Kalen's face did not change because he was a king. "Not because I wish to lie with anyone," he said. "Because I wish to stop lying about who we are." He looked around the room like a man counting sheep, before deciding which ones to keep and which to sell. "We pretend we are afraid of hybrids, because they unbalance us. The truth is we are afraid of them because they remind us that balance is a skill, not a state." Mireya spoke then, because if she let him carry her word, it would become his, even if he meant to give it back. "You fear me because I am 2 things that you have spent your whole life learning to keep apart. You think if I walk through your hall your children will forget how to be 1 thing at a time. Good. Let them forget. Let them learn to hold 2 knives by the flat of their blades and walk." She lifted her hands. The rain outside thickened just enough to be heard. "You call me creature. I call myself woman. I saved one of yours." She didn't look at Kalen then. "I would do it again." A younger elder, eyes clearer than the rest, leaned forward. "What do you want?" Mireya met his gaze. "To stop selling my blood to buy bread," she said. "To eat at a table without counting bites. To heal in the rain without a paper, saying I may. To be looked at by eyes that aren't waiting for a knife." She waited. "To stay if I choose, and to leave if I choose, and be safe either way." The room breathed. A woman who had been silent until now set her hands on the table and said, "Write it." She looked at Kalen. "Write a new law. Make it clean." They wrote. They argued. They wrote more. Kalen's hand was a machine for turning thought into ink when he wasn't holding a sword. Mireya stood behind him now, not because she was hiding, but because she liked watching the shape of letters that would teach the hall a new way to be. When it was done, the law said, "No person shall be taken for being 2 things at once. No person shall be given away. Healing is not a crime. Choice is a door. Only the one who walks through it decides if it is open." Kalen took the knife from the old treaty, wiped it clean, as if respecting the metal even if he hated the paper, and drove it through the new law into the table. "It stands," he said. "It stands," the younger elder echoed. The others didn't smile. They didn't have to. The room changed its breath. That was enough. The news went through Nightward like good rumor. Fast, sweet, with a bite. People who had hidden bits of themselves in pockets took them out and looked at them in daylight. A boy who could sing in 2 voices without breaking either did it in the yard. A girl who had been told to cut her hair because it made her look like her mother, let it down and laughed when it caught the rain. Mireya walked through it like a woman who had accidentally dropped a stone in a pond and was watching the circles make new shores. At dusk, Kaelan found her on the wall looking at the river, move like a mussel under the hills. "One night left," he said, soft. "One," she said, and the word tasted both like bread and like the edge of a knife. "After that, you don't ask me to stay because you changed law. You ask me because you want me to." "I wanted you before I had a name for it," he said. "In the road, in the rain." He waited. "Will you come down off this wall and eat with me as if it were ordinary?" "It will never be ordinary," she said. "Not this, not us." She looked at him and saw the thing she had been running from all year. A door that did not close behind you. A door that stayed open because someone trusted you enough not to burn the house if you walked through it, and then walked out again. "Yes," she said. "I will." They ate alone in a little room off the kitchen, because sometimes a king wants to be a man, and sometimes a woman who has been a creature wants to be just a woman. Kaelan cut bread. Mireya poured honey. He told her about the first time he shifted, how he broke his mother's chair because he didn't know how to put his bones back together yet. She told him about the first time she lit a candle without fire, how the coven mother smiled like she owned morning. He laughed. She did too. Then they were quiet the way people are when the quiet is not empty. When the bread was gone and the honey was just a ring in the jar, Kaelan put his hands on the table. "May I touch you?" he asked as if he were asking to borrow her knife. "You may," she said, "if you touch me like bread, not like debt." He reached and laid his palm against her cheek. He was warm. The way stones are warm after sun. She leaned into it. He didn't move the way men who are afraid of not being enough move. He didn't hurry. He waited for her to teach him where to put his fingers like a map. She took his hand down to her wrist where her pulse hid and let him feel it. "I am not a story you heard as a boy," she said. "Don't try to follow its ending." "I won't," he said. "I want yours." He bent and kissed her, the way people kiss when they have eaten in the same light, and spent a day making a thing that didn't exist yesterday. It wasn't fire. It was bread. Which is to say, it was warmth that could be shared without starving tomorrow. When night took the windows, wolves howled on the hill. The sound slid down the wood, and into the table and up their arms. Mireya felt the witch in her smile at the wolf, and the wolf in her put its head on the witch's knee. "There are nights," her mother had said once while kneading dough, "when the world remembers itself." This was one morning brought a messenger. Not a court man with nice shoes. A girl with mud to her knees and a paper in her fist that was damp but not unreadable. Kaelan broke the seal. The circle. Varin. Together. A summons in the old words. The kind that trespassed even on new law by pretending it had been written before law was invented. They wanted a parley at the broken birch where the treaty had been signed, because men who loved papers liked to make you bleed where your grandfathers bleeded. Kaelan looked at Mireya. "You don't have to come." "I do," she said, "because I am the door we are talking about. And if I don't stand in it, they will fill it with someone else without asking her name." The birch stood split like a mouth that couldn't close. The circle's women came with their ropes hidden in their sleeves, and their kindness hidden under their tongues. Varin came beautiful and bored. Kaelan came with wolves, who smelled like rain and ink. Mireya came with her hands empty, because she had learned that sometimes empty hands are the scariest kind. "King," Varin said, "Briar girl." His smile was old house cold. "New law travels fast. I don't mind. New things amuse me." "Then you'll be pleased when I tell you this," Kaelan said. "Nightward will not deliver hybrids to either of you. Not for trial, not for blood, not for anything." The coven mother who had never owned mourning but thought she had narrowed her eyes. "You think you can break what we built?" "I know it," Kaelan said, "because it breaks people I swore to stand before." He looked at Mireya then, not for permission, but for witness. She nodded. He went on. If you want war, say it. If you want peace, write it. Varin spread his hands. I want entertainment, he said. And profit. War gives me both. War takes your market, Mireya said, and he looked at her because he did not expect to be spoken to like a vendor selling rotten fruit. People don't pay well when they're hiding in the woods. They pay in squirrels and stories. You don't like either. He laughed because he loved his own voice when it was surprised. You have me there, he said. He looked at the Coven Mother. New law does not empty my cellars. The Briar Girl doesn't sell to me, but there are others. He waved a hand. Let the wolves keep their door. It will make them stupid with pride for a season, and then something else will enter the world, and we will all have to learn the new word for it. He stepped back. I don't fight over bread. The Coven Mother could not be bought with coin. She could be bought with the image of her own face in water. If we yield, she said slowly, girls will think they can choose. They already do, Mireya said. You just don't like watching. She lifted her hands. The rain thickened again because it loved her and because she asked nicely. Write a law that says balance is a skill. Teach your daughters to hold 2 knives. Or keep cutting them in half and see what grows in the space you made when they bleed out. Silence sat down like an old woman with tired knees. The birch creaked because even dead wood remembers wind. The Coven Mother looked at Mireya for a very long time. You will be trouble, she said at last, and it wasn't an insult. It was the closest thing to a blessing she could bear to give. She turned to Kaelin. Your law stands in your house. We will not cross your threshold to take one of yours. We will speak to our daughters. She made a face as if the words had spoiled wine in her mouth. Perhaps we will listen when they answer. It wasn't mercy. It wasn't surrender. It was a door unlatched. Sometimes that is more dangerous and more beautiful than either. Kaelin bowed just enough to be polite and not enough to be owned. Varin smiled and left because he had another house to visit, where someone else was learning to be a door. The wolves breathed out. Mireya breathed in. On the way back to Nightward, they walked slow because the world was new, and you don't hurry when you can look. Kaelin reached for her hand. She let him take it. 3 nights, he said. We spent 2 and a day, and a war in the 3rd. He looked at her, trying very hard not to look like a man waiting at a door with a basket of bread, and a hope he would not name aloud. Will you stay? Mireya looked at the hills rolling down toward the river like wolves leaning into sleep. She looked at the hall that smelled like thunder and honey. She looked at the birch in the distance, split and still standing. She put her free hand on his chest, where the new law beat against old scars. I will stay, she said, until I want to leave. And when I want to leave, I will tell you, and you will walk me to the gate, and smell the road after me, and not follow, unless I don't come back. Her mouth quirked. And I will come back if bread is hot. He laughed then, a sound that made the pines lift their heads because they loved it. I will keep the oven lit, he said. He lifted her hand to his mouth and kissed the place where her pulse hid. And I will not burn the loaves even when I am thinking of you. She leaned into him because balance is not the same thing as standing alone. Good, she said. Because I am tired of eating charred things. She looked at the sky. The rain had thinned to a mist that smelled like the first page of a book. There's a word for this, she said. For what? He asked. For being 2 things and not breaking, she said. For choosing and not being chosen for. For bread. She smiled. I don't know it yet, but I will. She looked at him. We will. That night, Nightward sang. Not a ceremony, not a war song. A kitchen song that people know how to sing, because they have taught it to children, while stirring things that take a long time to boil. Mireya sat on the steps with her little book, and wrote the first line of a story that wasn't a ledger. Kaelin sat beside her with a loaf in his hands and flour on his wrist. When he broke the bread, steam lifted like a blessing no one owned. Later, alone, Mireya walked out into the yard, where the rain had finally stopped. She tilted her head and breathed. The world smelled of wet wood and warm crumb, and a hand on her cheek that asked permission, and waited for the answer. Somewhere far in the trees, a wolf she had sewn together, lifted his head and sang. She answered, soft, because the law was new and fragile, and so was she, but some songs don't need to be loud to be true. You're here with her now, door open, rain gone. If it were you, what's the next move? Do you stay in Nightward with Kaelan, and build the new law brick by brick?